Once in the forest you'll find a fabulous banquet, a fairy ball. If you close your eyes and you open your mind, the veil disappears and you'll see it all.
Hi my angels, it's Haley Reese and I hope that you guys are excited for today's video because today is the part 3 to the 2 previous videos I posted, and the video where hopefully we will get to figure out what on earth has been going on with this man's wife, Natalie, and what exactly these sisters are. Now, if this is the very first video in the 3-part series you are seeing, stop right there. I will have a link to part 1 and part 2 at the top of my description box. You definitely want to get caught up. Trust me, if you're looking for something to binge on YouTube, this little series is creepy as ever and has had us all on edge, or at least I think so. It's definitely had me on edge for the past, this will be the 3rd day. So we are finally going to figure out what on earth is going on with these sisters, what's happening to Natalie, and if he can ultimately save her. Now, where we concluded was he was deciding if he was going to go back to that creepy house, and Natalie's eyes had completely changed from a bright, beautiful green to a pitch black. So let's get into part 4 and 5, but our part 3. Now this video is probably going to be just as long, if not longer, than the previous one. It seems like there's a lot crammed into these next 2 parts. Obviously, it's the end of it all, so that makes sense. So like I said in the last video, sit back, relax, maybe turn a light on, and let's see what happens next. Just when I thought maybe I had found peace, just maybe I could move on with everything, things got weirder. So Natalie's eyes remained black. After a couple of weeks of pretending that things were okay, I tried to talk to her about the whole situation, but she would always find a way to skirt around the conversation. Things have never really been the same. We eat dinner in silence. I wake up at night and find her staring at the ceiling. But enough was enough. I couldn't continue to live like this. I needed to find a way to fix things. And the only way I knew how to was to go back to that disturbing house. I sat down with Natalie and we had a long conversation about everything that had happened. And she reluctantly agreed that we needed to go back to the house. Whatever these sisters were, we needed to confront them. So before we headed to the house, we came up with a plan. A lot of you guys suggested that mirrors might help, so I made sure to bring a mirror with me. I mean, at this point, why not? Additionally, knowing how dark it was inside the house last time, I brought some night vision goggles. Now, the question about whether Natalie would accompany me or not, considering that she had been my savior every time, we decided it was best that she did go with me. However, I was not going to let her enter the house under any circumstances. I've also taken your suggestions on making sure that it is her. Even though Natalie has been significantly quieter than before, I make a point to ask her numerous questions and expect answers to make sure it's her. I can see the sadness in her eyes, how she knows that I have lost complete trust I used to have in her. But she complies and responds to my questions, knowing it's the only way I can keep a straight head in this entire situation. We arrived at the house at 11 a.m. in broad daylight. Not that it made a difference, since the house was dark as ever inside. Since it was in a pretty remote area, I didn't feel bad about hooking up a chain to the front door and pulling it off with my truck. I wasn't letting any door close on me this time. I had Natalie stand about 10 feet away from the door frame so that she could still see me as I walked in. My theory was that these sisters seemed unable to face her, so as long as I maintained a good line of sight with Natalie, I half-heartedly hoped they wouldn't appear. With my night vision goggles activated, I stepped into the house with Natalie nervously calling out from behind, "Be careful, honey." Even though so much has happened, I still found a sense of comfort in her voice. "It will be all right, I promise. We will fix this." I called back. The air was heavy inside the house and I found it slightly hard to breathe, but nevertheless, I had planned for this trip quite a few days and I wasn't about to back out. I saw the symbols again on the walls and I pulled out my phone and took some pictures. Everything in the house was trashed and dusty except a small cupboard on the wall across the living room. So far, I've been walking in a straight line, maintaining vision with Natalie, but this cupboard seemed odd. It had too many symbols around it and it was the only object in the house that seemed to be untouched. There had been no sign of the sisters. "I'm gonna go check something out really quickly. I'll be back, okay?" I called out to Natalie, who shook her head. "Okay, please just hurry. I want to leave already." I sprinted across the room and looked through the drawers. All were empty except the last one, which had a small pocket-sized leather-bound diary. I immediately put it in my pocket and started to head back. Just then I turned around to find the smiling face of my wife with a glass of water in her hand and eyes that looked greener than ever. Honestly, for a moment, I admired her beautiful green eyes, only to immediately snap out of it and realize this is the entity I was facing. I slowly began to walk past it. Just as I passed her, "Is everything okay in there?" Natalie yelled from outside. The moment the sound of her voice reached me, I heard the glass shatter behind me. I knew what was going on, and in that adrenaline-filled moment, I said, "Screw it, I'm gonna give this a shot." I pulled out the mirror, turned it around, and held it in front of its face. Now I could see her through my night vision goggles, head tilted, grinning. It let out a scream and shattered the mirror in my hand. I slowly began to back up towards Natalie's line of sight, eyes closed shut. Just when I thought I was almost there, I bumped into someone. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder and a face right next to mine. "You came back to us," it whispered in my ear. The most disturbing part wasn't that my eyes were closed, it was the fact that it sounded like 5 people were saying it at the exact same time, some with deeper and some with higher pitched voices. Then I felt another hand as I swung around to the ground with a force I couldn't comprehend. As I fell, I crawled towards the little light coming through the door. I barely got enough to see Natalie screaming outside, running towards the house. "Stop, Natalie, stop, don't come in," I yelled as she halted a couple of feet from the door. No, not you two. They can't have you two. They said they wouldn't." At the time, I didn't really pay attention to what she said. I felt a hand holding my foot, knowing they were trying to drag me out of her vision. I noticed my phone had fallen out. At this point, I became very dizzy and I reached to unlock my phone. Even though it was dark, Natalie's face lit up on my phone screen background, her beautiful green eyes radiant as ever. I gave her one last look as I began to pass out. Right before I passed out, I felt the hand on my foot release. I woke up in the hospital as my blurry vision became clear. Natalie jumped at me and gave me a hug. "Oh, thank God, you're okay. Can you see? Look at me, can you see?" As she moved back, the first thing I noticed were her green eyes. They were just as radiant as they used to be. "Your eyes," I mumbled. Natalie let out a scream of joy when she realized I could see. Yes, honey, my eyes are okay. I feel like myself now. Everything is okay." I had so many questions in that instance, but the doctor insisted I rest. The next morning, while the doctors were completing all the paperwork for my discharge, I spoke to Natalie about what happened at the house. She explained that as I was falling unconscious, she ran into the house to see that the sisters were staring at my phone screen. The instant Natalie saw them, they looked up at her. After a brief stare, they disappeared. She also told me that she was pulling me out of the house. It started crumbling and collapsing to the ground and we barely made it out. Really? I thought to myself. Was it that simple? Then I remembered about the pictures I'd taken in the house when I reached for my phone to look at them. "What are you looking for, love?" Natalie said as she looked at me desperately going through my photos. "I took some pictures in the house, but I can't find them," I replied as I wondered what happened to them. I don't remember you taking any pictures." She grabbed my phone and slid it in her purse. "But we'll worry about that later. I'm just so glad you're okay." And she gave me a hug. Does anybody else find that really weird? I don't know, I find that really odd. She was acting a little strange. Did she delete the pictures from my phone? I noticed my jacket hanging on the door, the same one I had worn when I went inside the house. I walked over to put it on. "It's chilly in here." I smiled at Natalie, and then the doctor called her to sign some papers, and she turned away. I immediately felt inside my pocket. I could still feel that small leather diary. Ever since we've been home, Natalie has been constantly by my side, quite literally. The only time I was not with her was when I went to use the bathroom. I pulled out the diary and looked at the first page. "Herein lies what little knowledge we have gained over the generations since the birth of the sisters." I was about to flip the page and Natalie began banging on the door. "Are you okay in there?" "Yes, I'm fine, honey. I'll be out in a bit," I yelled back. Something is not right. She won't leave me alone for 1 minute. Not to mention what she said before I passed out. She knows something she won't tell me, and I don't want to confront her just yet. I went to work today and tried to read the diary whenever I got the chance, but I had a busy day. The story is quite long, but I'm getting close to finishing it. Earlier today, I left work a couple hours early and drove to a supposedly demolished house. What I saw disturbed me. The house was burnt to the ground as if somebody had deliberately set fire to it. Why would Natalie lie to me? Did she set this house on fire? I'm also starting to doubt a lot of what she has said recently. Natalie keeps calling for me to come to bed, and I'm in my study writing this update. I keep lying, saying I'm writing something for work. I also told her I have to go into work tomorrow morning for a few hours to make up for the time I was in the hospital. She bought it, and I'll be going over to a coffee shop instead to finish reading the contents of the diary. I will keep you guys updated on the contents of this diary. Ooh, that's where we lead into part 5, and I just have to say, a sneaking suspicion has me thinking that Natalie isn't Natalie. Her eyes are green again. She won't let him be alone. The pictures are deleted. I don't know, you guys. What do you guys think? Drop a comment now because we're about to get into the conclusion. We're about to hit part 5 and then it won't be a mystery anymore. So take a moment, drop a comment. Let's get into part 5. So I'll pick up where I left off. When I finished my previous post, I went to bed, ready to go to the local Starbucks the next morning to finish reading the diary. Surprisingly, I actually fell asleep, all the while Natalie holding my hand and telling me everything is all right. I woke up at 3 a.m. feeling thirsty. By now I've realized that this is not really normal, but then again, nothing has been normal. I decided to go down to the kitchen and get a drink of water anyways. As I tried to slip my hand out of Natalie, she instantly woke up. "What's wrong, honey?" she inquired. Her eyes were not sleepy. It was as if she was never really sleeping at all. "Oh, nothing, love. I just need to get a drink of water," I replied. Before I even got out of bed, she was out and ready to go down with me. She held my hand and walked down to the kitchen as I got a glass of water. She was being overprotective, too protective. Mind you, there wasn't really anything wrong with her. She was herself, and I couldn't help but feel that she was making sure I never see the entity again, which is why every chance she got, she tried to be around me. We went back to bed and I fell asleep, knowing Natalie was probably not sleeping at all. In the morning, she asked me several questions about why I was going to work. I made some decent excuses. "Sweetheart, I'll be fine. I thought you said it was over. They're gone," I told her. "Yes, of course. I just want to make sure. I just want to spend as much time with you as I can after all this has happened," she said, with an almost sad look on her face. I arrived at the Starbucks, ordered some coffee, and without further delay, pulled out the diary and began reading. Before I tell you about the contents of the diary, I want to make some observations regarding the diary itself. It was very old, leather-bound, almost falling apart. It had several different types of handwriting throughout, suggesting it had been passed down and multiple people had taken notes in it. The notes within the diary were very scattered, and I tried my best to piece everything together. The diary began telling a story of two sisters who were born a year apart. The first was Madeline. I'm gonna call her Madeline, because I like that movie. Born on March 11th, 1800, a beautiful girl with bright green eyes. She was the first child to her parents. The second daughter was born on March 11th, 1801. This seemed a little odd to the parents, but they didn't give it too much thought. Since their second daughter also had green eyes like her older sister Madeline, they named her Caroline. As they grew older, the parents realized that both Madeline and Caroline were identical, and not just identical twins. They looked exactly the same. It was only later that the parents realized not only were their daughters born on the same day, they were born at exactly 3 a.m. Initially, they went and saw several different doctors, but none of them could explain the strange phenomena. All they could conclude was that it was a strange thing. Eventually, the entire family just accepted the strange phenomenon and continued on with their lives. Of the two sisters, Caroline, the younger one, was very lively and energetic. She had a way with words, and all the townspeople were very fond of her. Madeline, the older sister, was quite quiet-natured. She didn't speak too much, and over the years had come to envy her sister Caroline. Caroline would sometimes pretend to be Madeline to confuse people. For the most part, the sisters were like any other siblings, and with usual conflict every now and then. Now this next part of the story takes a dark turn. It turns out both Madeline and Caroline fell in love with the same man. Thomas was very wealthy, a businessman, and they both got to know him because he worked closely with their father. Seemingly, Caroline admired Thomas's wealth more than anything, whereas Madeline was in love with Thomas. Thomas chose to marry Caroline, not knowing that her affection wasn't real. Being the quiet one, Madeline didn't say anything. On their wedding day, however, when Madeline saw Caroline getting ready to put on her wedding dress, she couldn't contain her anger and frustration and confronted her little sister. In a heated argument, she accidentally pushed Caroline down the stairs, causing her to die. What happened next was even more bizarre. In a state of shock and emotional distress, Madeline hid her younger sister in the closet and put on Caroline's wedding dress and proceeded with the ceremony. Madeline got married to the love of her life and proceeded to move forward in her life as if nothing happened. A few days later, Caroline's body was discovered. The reason they knew it was Caroline is because the parents had secretly marked both sisters with 2 distinct burn marks on their back. Once word got out, Thomas left Madeline in utter disgust. Madeline realized that her new life was now ruined, realized what she had done, and hung herself. Now I realized that Caroline was the only one who smiled, the one who talks, the one who can imitate people. Madeline, on the other hand, is a twisted form of the entity. So at this point I asked myself, so that's it? They're ghosts haunting the family? Well, not quite. The diary continued to explain what happened next. A generation later, the family was blessed with another beautiful baby girl named Laura. As Laura grew up, the rest of the family couldn't help but notice she looked exactly like Madeline and Caroline. Slowly, the family started seeing the entity and strange things began to happen. Now the writer in the diary claims that they do not completely understand the origin of the overlap. However, they do know that it happens when the child experienced immense emotion. Now, I won't give you each and every detail of the diary, as the notes were quite extensive. The diary gave several accounts of different daughters being born into the family, every once in a while that followed the same pattern. They look like Madeline and Caroline, and things around them become strange. Over the course of the notes, the diary writers' understanding of the entity increased. All cases ended with the sisters taking complete possession of the daughter or the child and disappearing. Over the years, the family figured out that the original burn marks used by the parents to mark the two sisters could shield items from the sisters. However, this did not work when the marks were applied on people. The notes went back and forth on what exactly the sisters were until I arrived at the last few pages of the diary, which were written by Natalie's great-grandmother. At least that was my guess. Turns out she was a neurologist. She theorized that the sisters were a part of this child. This is why no one ever found an end to the sisters. They reside within the mind of that child. This meant that part of Natalie was the two sisters. Natalie's great-grandmother continued by saying Natalie is not to blame. The sisters are able to communicate with her subconsciously. Therefore, she knows they exist, but is not completely aware of what happens around her. To my horror, I turned to the next page hoping for a solution. The final words in the diary read, "It's her. They are a part of her." In every past case, the final stage was complete control of the child's body by the entity, after which the immediate people around the child would die, and then the child would disappear. The sisters are entities that feed off of immense emotion. Unfortunately, we have tried, but killing the child does not end the cycle. They will be coming for me next, as they have seen the diary in my possession. I am hiding this diary under with the prescribed markings. To whoever finds this, I am sorry. Now, I wrote that last paragraph without telling you how shocked I was. Was this it? Was there no solution? Is that why Natalie has been staying so close to me? Does she realize she will eventually be lost to the sisters? How did she save me that day at the house? Did she actually interact with the entity? I closed the diary, my heart racing. I could not lose Natalie. She is my world. She is everything to me. As I looked up, I realized it was almost dark. I had spent nearly the whole day reading this diary. As I drove back home, I didn't know what to do. I did decide that I needed to confront Natalie and tell her about the diary, even though that probably didn't sound like the best idea. But what other choice did I have? When I got back home, Natalie rushed into my arms and I apologized for being so late. We had a nice dinner, and afterwards she asked me if we could look at the stars for a while. Considering everything happening lately, I gladly agreed. "Remember how we used to climb on the roof of the engineering building on campus and stare at the stars?" she asked. "Yeah, and I still stand by what I said then. I don't need to look at the stars when I can look at you." I responded, "I love you so much. Always know that." She said, and she started crying. I held her as I couldn't help but think that she knew what was going on. That night I went to bed, fully intending to confront her the next morning. I woke up at 2:45 a.m. to Natalie quietly kissing my forehead. I pretended to stay asleep as I heard her walk downstairs. I quietly got up and followed her down. Then I saw her, holding a suitcase and walking towards the front door. "Natalie, honey, what's going on?" I called out. She turned, eyes full of tears. "I have to go. I'm so sorry. I have to go. Please." I wasn't letting her go. I had gone through too much for her sake. "Natalie, I know everything." I started, but she kept glancing at the watch. "No, you don't. I asked them to. I told them to take me but leave you alone," she screamed. Now I was really worried. "Natalie, what did you do? How did you get me out of that house? Natalie, be honest with me. For once, trust me." She collapsed on the floor. I begged them to leave you alone and take me. I have been fighting them for so long. I've been fighting to keep them away for so long. Half the time I don't even know who's in control. They agreed they will leave you alone only if I stop fighting them, but it's too late now. I am no longer fighting them in my mind. I have given them control of my body. Run, run, run. As her last words began, I noticed strange inflections in her voice. "Run," she screamed as she looked up, her eyes pitch black, her head starting to tilt, a grin slowly forming on her face. The clock behind her read 3 a.m. What happened was probably the craziest thing I have ever done, but in hindsight, these last couple of months have made me braver than I ever was. As I stood up, I rushed towards her and gave her a big hug. "I know you're in there, love. I know you've been protecting me all this time. You've always been my savior. Now it's time for me to save you. It's time that I protect you. Come back to me, Natalie. Come back. You are stronger than they are. Fight back. Fight back for me. Fight back for us. I love you. I can't live without you." I held her, eyes shut close. "Remember the stars? Remember how we stared at them that night? Remember how we stared at them all those years ago? I still think your eyes shine brighter than any of the stars in the sky." In that adrenaline-filled moment, I kept talking about our most cherished memories until I felt tears falling down my shoulder. I finally had the guts to pull away to see that she'd returned to being my Natalie, eyes shining bright green, full of tears. "I'm so sorry," she said as I held her for a long time. "After everything that has happened, I have realized that I was so afraid of the world. I've always feared the monsters that existed in my imagination, and the only person I saw that could shelter me was Natalie. Little did I know that all along she'd been fighting against something much more scary. She needs me more than ever, and I have finally come to see that. I realized that I have to fight for the one I care about so deeply. I believe that in that moment Natalie gave the sisters control over her body. They became vulnerable. Somehow, they seem to be trapped inside Natalie. Life is not going to be normal anymore, but I don't care. As long as I have Natalie, everything will be all right. It's been a week since, and things are still trying to normalize. Still, sometimes at night I wake up and I turn and look at Natalie. I see those pitch black eyes, but I hold Natalie's hand, and in the blink of an eye, her green eyes return, brighter than ever." What? And that's the end of this story, you guys. So there's like a whole twisted history to this. I feel like I have to process this, but basically she has demons inside of her now, these evil sisters, and he has to fight to pull her out. Now, can we take a moment to appreciate that last sentence and think about rolling over and seeing those dark eyes and having to pull someone out of it? Whew, that would be so scary. Oh my goodness. Wow. What do you guys think of the end of this story? Do you guys think that was how you expected it to end? What do you think is going to happen to them in the future? Please, please, please drop a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this series. Let me know what you thought of these stories. And I'm going to be replying because I can't even tell you what I think right now because my mind is just so freaked out and confused. And I think I just have to process what on earth I think happened in this long, creepy story. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this little mini series of this creepy story. I definitely enjoyed reading it with you guys and enjoyed being on this spooky journey together. I don't know, if you guys like things like this, we can definitely do more of them in the future. But that is it for today's video. If you guys are new to my channel or you're just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, I would absolutely love it if you would go ahead, click that subscribe button and become a Reese's Pieces. We would love to have you, and please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. It makes my heart super happy and I really appreciate it, so please do that. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness, and until next time, I love you.